is Samantha Lynch, who's coming from Brighton University. That's, yeah, no,
Just testing. Okay, so it matters what ideas we use to think other ideas. Is the sound okay? Yeah, okay. So I start the presentation with this quote, as it reflects what's at the heart of my current drawing process. The drawings I'll share today are all part of a wider body of work that is focused on temporality, is dynamic, rooted in a poetic practice, and inquisitive through not only the act of drawing, but as well through the territories that these drawings create and share between them. The complexity of connections between pieces, whether intuitive, formal, poetic, or essential, in a way can be understood as the work itself. So what separates one moment from another? My creative practice is founded in a fascination with the nature and experience of time. It goes back to one of the earliest concepts I remember pondering, the question of what separates one thing from another. It was the beach in my childhood that introduced me to this mystery, shrinking myself into the grains of sand to find the impossibly elusive threshold between lake and shore. The spatial quandary finds similar form in the temporal, whether between constructed units of time or perhaps more curiously in our awareness of events and moments. The presentation today implicitly explores this enigmatic condition through the lens of my drawing-based research in order to reflect on ways that a changing understanding of temporality through drawing can affect the potential structures of drawing inquiry and engagement with the world. My work pushes against the temporal conventions of linear time in order to open the scope of the architectural imagination, connecting multiple temporalities through an intimate engagement with the architecture drawing. I must drink some water. Okay, so returning to the separation of moments, the writer Jorge Luis Borges has a passage that I consider to fully resonate the central core of my inquiry. He writes, "We can postulate in the mind of an individual, or of two individuals who do not know of each other, but in whom the same process works, two identical moments. Once this identity is postulated, one may ask, are not these identical moments the same? Is not one single repeated term sufficient to break down and confuse the series of time? Do not the fervent readers who surrender themselves to Shakespeare become literally Shakespeare?" Embodying this collapse in the trajectory of time is the fundamental motivation of the research as I seek to articulate its conditions in my own language. The architectural drawing necessitates prediction, an oscillation between the present unfolding and another time. But time is conceptually elusive, often discussed with terms that are more spatially evocative than essentially temporal. When drawing, one ventures and reflects in no particular sequence. This is notably relevant to the architectural drawing, where the temporal condition of the drawing itself holds an embedded future time. We conjure, collude with, and enact this imaginary realm, and often do so in a surprisingly matter-of-fact way. To return to the opening quote, it matters what ideas we use to think ideas through. Architects bridge multiple times in a way that offers consequence, that inhabits a particular condition, so not matter-of-fact, but actually rather wild. Oh, sorry, I've skipped ahead. The author Bruno Schultz writes, what is to be done with events that have no place of their own in time, events that have occurred too late? Could it be that time is too narrow for all events? Don't let's panic, we can settle it all calmly with our own terms of reference. So my intention is to experience and inhabit multiple times simultaneously. So through the drawing, I'm looking for a way of sustaining this condition, so it does not exist as a conceptual position, but as a lived one, which is why the Borges quote has such gravity for me. This is motivated by findings in my PhD work, which I'll touch on soon. I'll also stretch back to some earlier research, which you're seeing here, to provide context to the inquiry that drives the newest drawings. I'll notate through the presentation to offer a kind of skeleton of the active ideas. I find many beginnings for my work in this project, so this is the Displacement Cameras project, where I'm able to explore moments of inhabitation and transform the architecture that I inhabit, in this case, the Contemporary Art Museum in Lyon, Spain. There are 3 cameras and a set of mirrors and drawing tools. The chosen mirror occludes and reflects equally, depending on which camera is registering it. One camera captures the image in the mirror, another the drawing intervention, and the third camera captures the work of the drawing tools, which may be mirrored, light gathering, reflective, colored, etc. This is the Casa de Musica in Porto. The two main cameras are able to photograph the same scene simultaneously for differing durations, blending new potentials of perception and allowing the architectures to be reinvented with their very own fabric through the controlled fragmentation and reflection of the space recorded in the images. Completed in 2017, my PhD entitled The Dark Mirror, Engaging Multiple Temporalities Through Drawing. It focused on the interweaving of temporality and imagination, asking how through the act of drawing one might reflect on things that haven't happened yet. For this work, I made a series of mirrored apparatus. These displacement devices share a simple setup between two times, the time of the external world and the time of the mirror, that then allow for poetic explorations to be expanded through engagement. In this work, what I describe as the slippery character of time activates a condition of possibility, an expanding territory in which I am able to sustain differing temporalities simultaneously. So it's a bit like Borges imagining that he's Shakespeare, but in one scene it's nighttime, and the other scene it's breakfast. And the most important thing is that there's an intuitive or tacit awareness of both conditions happening at once. The collapse still exists, but then the potential trajectories multiply. The philosopher Henri Bergson explores the nature of experiential time and his duration and simultaneity. He writes, "How do we pass from this inner time to the time of things? We perceive the physical world, and the perception appears, rightly or wrongly, to be inside and outside us at one and the same time. In one way, it is a state of consciousness, in another, a surface film of matter, in which perceiver and perceived coincide." As Bergson makes clear, there is no one defined way of understanding the differentiation that occurs in our relationship with time. The effect of such is an inherent multiplicity, ambiguously bridging matter and experience. In my drawing process, I'm interested in engaging with Bergson's film. I do so in the displacement work and eventually develop it through a drawn language that communicates between pieces. The poetic construct supports this, allowing leaps between ideas and impossibilities to sit comfortably together, so poems work without explanation. Another helpful condition in the work I call neighboring. So neighboring is a way of encouraging conversations between multiple temporalities and territories. The still life painting Bouquet in a Niche embodies this condition in both method and content. Here we can see a carefully arranged display of flowers. The vase is full, each flower in a state of perfect bloom. For all its meticulous realism, the image embodies a contradiction. The chosen flowers reach perfect bloom at different times of season. Thus, we see an impossible bouquet, a gathering of varying temporalities held in conversation with each other. Cultivating a temporal thickness without continuity, the drawing potential that arises from the engagement between these flowers begins to motivate the work. Okay, so these are just some of the key points that I thought I'd just bring out, because I know I've just said a lot of things, but so interested in that kind of threshold condition, what's separating moments or conditions, so the lake and the shore, the surface film of matter, what lies between the flowers. Sustaining simultaneous multiple temporalities, so engaging with multiple trajectories in practice. Resonance of materiality and content, so unfolding the existing fabric into the new, like I was doing with the displacement cameras. The poetic construct, so just allowing impossible things to sit with one another. And then neighboring, so this activating of multiple interpretations and conversations. So the mirror drawings. The temporal conversations that occurred in the displacement devices they also found form in the mirror drawings. These were made on card that already had a content and history, but one that I was not familiar with. These marks were not illustrative of any particularities. The drawings began as esoteric surfaces that I was able to experiment with. The method of drawing is as follows. So I would cut a seam and allow a hinge. There are a variety of formats for this. I use the seam to mirror the existing content. I slip the surfaces over each other and mirror the marks. This results in a multiplicity of echoes. There are no fixed positions. I'm free to register as I choose. The conjuring and unexpected territories that arise come out of a condition that is in flux. The content proliferates as the drawings gather pre-existing marks into the fray of the new and the fictional. The physicist Karen Barad writes, "Time can't be fixed. The past is never closed, never finished once and for all, but there is no taking it back, setting time aright, putting the world back on its axis. There is no erasure, finally. The trace of all reconfigurings is written into the enfolded materializations of what was, is to come. These markings cannot be isolated to one event, to one mirroring. The drawing plane holds the registration of moments and desires. Connections and traces are sought out or brought into focus." So in the mirror drawings, temporal collapse takes form through the refolding of the picture plane. The interloper drawings continue this. So interloper was a site-specific installation that I made in Halle, Germany, as part of a funded residency that was organized by Charlotte Eckhart, who's here with us today. And I was able to reflect on the conditions and questions in my work by engaging with the entirety of the site. Lines threaded the gallery from oriented wooden structures. You can see a bit on the right there. And that allowed me to suspend the drawings where they needed to be in space. Dark reflections of mirror worlds laid below the drawings, occupying both ground and shifting horizon. The drawing content came from a series of collages that I made from photographs of the space over time that I then transferred to the surface so that, along with the site itself, I had embedded content to respond to. I worked on both sides of the paper and used the same methods of conjuring that I used in the mirror drawings. The body of work was able to activate the relationships between site, drawing plane, image, mirror worlds, content and surface, and to ultimately test these out through inhabitation. It's just another image of a detail of one of the scenes. And then that's the mirror world. Okay, so then we can add to it that the drawings are dynamic, and I think it's important that the drawings are also joined and separate simultaneously, and then also conjuring, so this mark making able to bring content to the drawings, and then resonance between the site and the drawings. Okay, so the garden drawings. For the last year and a half, I've been working on the garden drawings, site-specific to an allotment that I co-own. The site offers the temporalities and unpredictability of living beings to become part of the work. There's a great variety of life in the garden. Most of what is grown is edible. I have planted the seeds of memories, some from childhood, some from experiences later in life, some for curiosity of future unpredictability. So bog bean, black salsify, strawberries, foxglove, and cornflowers take their place amongst the almost wild raspberries and continuously spreading horseradish. The garden shed, it was built by the owner of the plot, so my colleague Lucy Ann Gilbert. She made that from a pub that was nearby. It's like the old wood from the pub, and it has like little steps up to it, which is the place where I like to sit to take in the activity of the garden life. This just highlights some of the key things on site. So that wall at the end is a big part of the drawings as I'm working. So I'm thinking about that wall. I'm thinking about some of the things in the landscape around, but also the raspberries, the step, and then there's the pond and some patches of various plants that seem to have more meaning to me than others. So this is garden drawing 1. I'm not good with titles, but okay. With the plantings, it is easy to conjure memories of long ago spaces. What the drawings allow me to do is to ask questions about how these disparate times might relate and how they might unfold future possibility. Events accrue and resurface. Speculation of the future appears more stable than this present that cannot stay still. I'm using a similar method to the mirror and interloper drawings, but this time partly as a propositional design tool where the marks as scratches of a loose plan begin to conjure territories of memory and of future ideas, and the drawing positions translate from plan to section, in a way encouraging a weaving together of orthographic projection in time. Testing a series of what I call time pools on site, these little insertions act as displacement devices. You can see that on the right there. The two sides of the paper also converse. A nebulous, nonlinear set of interchangeable relationships develops, so a specific fold in the paper in one relationship is an ontological shift in another. The gaps and occlusions have spatial and temporal consequence. The life of the garden continuously transforms. Simultaneously, let's go here. Yeah, simultaneously I've been working on the time pool accretion, a drawing that becomes a three-dimensional way of thinking through the site. It accrues layers and changes forms. It also changes questions. And this is a long-term thing I was working on. So, inspired by Werner's color classifications that link poetically between life and the landscape. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but that's a really nice, a very nice collection of colors. I work with the paint metaphorically, so here the paint is the color of the white of human eyeballs. Materials mirror and hinge in multiple ways. And yeah, I think choosing this paint, this color of human eyeballs, it just allowed me to have this idea that the drawing could also see me and see itself. So yeah, that's what I mean by working with it metaphorically. And then garden drawing 2 begins to register the new plants and encroaching blackberries. The plants grow wilder and new characters emerge. The idea of the drawing is the same but different as garden drawing 1, invites contemplation on revisiting memories. So memories become this kind of memories of memories. In preparing for the next drawing, the plants begin to accrue the formal qualities of my experience on site, and I'll just kind of briefly, but there you can see on the right there, that's stuff that's planted, and I'm trying to understand it over time, but I haven't yet activated that within the work, so that's not really, even though it seems really obvious that that would be a thing to activate, it hasn't come through as a way of structuring the drawings yet. And yeah, and then this is garden drawing 3. Here I'm further exploring some of the new territories, as well as expanding the drawing approach through testing out multiple forms of representation. So moving back to the flat image, I attempt a more complex play of projection, using the drawing surface to carry out multiple levels of inquiry at once. Architect Sanford Quinter writes, "Flat, of course, does not mean a diminished or impoverished dimensionality. Quite the contrary, for what we have here belongs more than anywhere else to the world of fractal geometry, a world whose singularity lies in its ability to maintain a prodigious but constant level of complexity at every scale. Based on the relations between content and form enfolding itself into the work, ideas of self-similarity as a form of analogy begin to emerge." The space of the void shimmers as a kind of, these are just some details, as a viewpoint from certain angles. A window projects new ideas into plan and cuts a void in the surface of the drawing. Actions between ideas have potential spatial consequence. So returning to the time pool accretion, so you can see that on the bottom right, just to remind you. In a new way, I find a method for organizing the most critical ideas in the work and begin to make worlds of them by dissecting and multiplying. There are 3 drawings that emerge, seen on the top right, of which the image on the left is one, so those are the 3. The relationship of plan and section is key in this first one, which manifests a deeper consideration of the cornflowers, also a memory of a 13-year-old desire for a very beautiful dress, and the neighboring hills of the distance. The drawing allows a field into which I can discover connections, much like with the pre-marked paper of the mirror drawings. This time, the content has layers and layers of iterative meaning folded in. Traveling between ideas becomes jungle-like as hidden fields and perspectives emerge. So the drawing is not static. There are some movable parts to it. Also, the light plays games with it. It's not quite flat, and it's not quite one-sided. The second time pool drawing returns to the lake and considers the pools, the mirrors, and ideas of conjuring through surface. Some details. So materially, the drawing is reflective, so it also can create its own light source under flash, as you can see on the right. And in the third of this series, I think through surfaces. So the screen that you saw in one of the earlier images, the white of the wall, thinking about that. Also thinking about it as a field of registration. And then the funny shape that you see up in the, oh, I can use the pointer here. This is This is a foot that was formed in the time pool accretion. So what would happen is the paint would seep through the seams onto kind of an awaiting bed of graphite, and then it would just pick up those, and then it would take weeks to dry, which is why I worked on that drawing for so long. But and then these become kind of drawing tools in themselves. Yeah, I'm 2 minutes away, so that's yeah. So so this is just some details. I also start rubbing the drawings and then end up with these layers of what's hidden between that you can't actually visually access. So then there's this other kind of life that starts to happen with the drawings. And these are just examples of where the mirror is drawing. The drawings are drawing. So they all have these pieces that are able to do that. So I'm just gonna, so added to that is memories of memories, the depth of surface. So the idea of the lake as a mirror, flattening, topology, the drawing's drawing. And then, this is one of the rubbings. And what was nice about this one, the one thing I'll share here is that, so the lake that I was talking about earlier, the beach, that place where I grew up was, there was an old sawmill that was close by, and the entire bed of the lake was covered in old wood. And I remember as a kid going out over that in a boat, and then just being able to find all of these different shapes. And as I was drawing this, I was drawing the lake, and then these shapes just started to emerge. It was just very strange. Like, I think there was just a really nice poetry within that. And this is just a detail. So I'll end here, saying that the inquiry that drives the work has allowed a field in which the drawing-based research can engage with the world in unpredictable yet integral ways. Neighboring conditions fluctuate, encouraging the slippery character of time and poetic impossibilities to flourish, sustains a place where the imagination can move in multiple trajectories simultaneously. The prediction of the architectural drawing in my own practice is not approached linearly, but through tending these many tendrils of possibility, supporting the unknown as a welcome muse. The oscillations between is where the work lies. So no sequence can arrive at this. Again, it matters what ideas we use to think other ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam and Jordan. Totally fascinating work. The question, I think, is a simple one. Unlike many of the people in the room or other talks that we've had, you seem to both work as documentarians, let's say, reading situations and then drawing lives or hidden lives or capacities out of them. And the question maybe is simple. Do you imagine there's a reciprocal agreement between drawing these things out which exist and then going back as a result of your work and remaking those conditions themselves? So often architects, we use references and we draw from them, but seldom have I seen practices that go back to the references as a result of work that's done on them or through them, and then rebooting the references themselves. So it seems interesting to me that you would harvest things on the one hand. I think you're both harvesters and you're documenting things. Is there an interest, perhaps, the garden, your father's shed, and so on, to go back as a result of what you've now seen, to remake those places? Documentarians seldom do that, and you seem inventively documentary making people.
Yeah, I don't feel that I don't feel that I'm documenting something, though. I think that maybe that's the thing that, like, in some way that's not really part of the process. I'm just kind of using it to start to gather things that might be in the future or in the past to bring there. And then so the reason why I'm not saying I'm a documentarian is because I'm not being very true, like, to what, to how someone else might see the thing. I'm being really, really, well, right now, just really, like, relishing in this kind of new space that I'm trying to make, this kind of territory where where those things can become another thing than what they are. So I'm using my mother, but it's not my mother, because I wouldn't use my mother, but it's kind of, it's just, so for me, it's not quite I wouldn't consider myself at any point documenting, even though it seems the obvious thing to do because of the allotment. So I think I keep that as part of the structure, knowing that I can do that, and then I kind of do all the things that I'm not, like, maybe not supposed to do.
Yeah. I think about it constantly. Is what does it become? The idea of becoming. I feel like in work, it's this, then that, and it becomes things. And I'm personally trying to become more comfortable in the never-ending becoming. That it doesn't get to a point where that project is wrapped up and it's finished. So maybe I'm cautious, but I'm also I don't know what the translation is. Like, what happens between this and that? Is it an installation and then? I'm just worried that if I treat things that way, then I won't dwell in them for what they are. And I think I'm just cautious that, and maybe it's just in the unknown of what that would be. But I think about it all the time. Does it need to? Does that make sense? Is it a step along the way? And if it did, what does that?
Maybe a quick follow-up, just really, really quick. Is there a fitness for both of you in terms of not just when to finish a photographic series or how many drawings you would make, Sam? Is there a moment where there's a kind of an ecstasy or a kind of an apex or a culmination where, okay, I made 48 of these, Jordan, and finito, or?
So that's what I think is weird about this work, and I feel I can't fully comprehend it, because I feel it's only at the very, very beginning, in a way, that it's something that's going to be very slow, and it's why I was saying that the work actually lies between the pieces, because it's not, I don't think it's any one piece. So those last 3 drawings are just they came out of the body of another drawing, and as to when that way of thinking might end, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I think it's like this energy that a project will have, and if it has its own energy, then it can bring me with it a little bit. And then there's some times where if that moment switches and I'm dragging it along, then that's when it stops for the moment. Like with these things, I can't believe that those of you that spend years on work, and that just blows my mind. Like, I think it's awesome that you can sit and come back to something. The last time I did that, I came back to a painting that I did 10 years ago, and I painted the damn thing black. I was like, I don't know. So I just covered it and I started over, so that you can go back and back and back and remain interested in that project is a skill set that I think could be learned, and I'm just trying to get there. So to me, it's when the energy stops, and I don't know what that is, and it doesn't. And some of these, like, they'll happen so fast, and it just made itself, and I was just there. And maybe that's the documentarian side, that some places tend to reveal themselves to you in a certain way that just happens, while others are hiding behind a curtain, and you think you see it, and you can't find it. That idea is just elusive. So, thanks.
Thank you, both of you, for wonderful presentations. You both had interesting ways, and particular ways of talking about memory and how that shaped your thinking in your work. And I'm wondering how the work itself, if it can be read as an act of remembering, as in remembering, layering different elements. Obviously, the layering is there. But for instance, what the Sam, specifically, you were talking about in one of your works, writing over objects on a lake. Those objects, these shapes are coming out. And my question, I think, are the shapes that come out through the remembering process, are those memory or are those new? Is that something different than memory itself? Is that a bridge to the future, or is that a key to the past?
Yeah, so that in that particular scenario that I was discussing there, the drawing itself was, the shapes were just coming out from the actual physical experience, but then because I was mentally thinking of the lake, then that connection was made with what was happening. So it was serendipitous, it wasn't planned, and it wasn't conceptual. But then my ability to then make that bridge was just something, and I think that's a lot for me in the process of drawing and this work. I'm trying to find those connections between things to be able to remember things from another perspective, I would say. So there's actually, there's not really one place I'm standing within this work, and everything is turning itself over, folding and slipping, and the memories themselves are becoming sort of just totally other things that hold a lot of the emotions that that the actual memory, the original memory would have had. So then it's embedding these these feelings within the work, but those kind of give a certain flavor to the way that the drawing then starts to unfold. So yeah, it's sort of it's a bit of a memory, like it's a kind of hybrid.
Yeah. When Google Earth first started Street View, your processors couldn't keep up, so it would lag, and you'd get the back. And I remember first doing that and thinking that feeling of whatever you went past, you're carrying in some way, these bits. So part of it is you document a place of time maybe, but there is something that I feel like you owe it to the memory to think about what its potential is. And that becomes the harder part, is what to do with it once you have it. And still unclear about that. But I think it's, both of a kind of a memory, but of something else. Also think that maybe there's a lack of language around the physical construct of what I even mean by using that term. Does that make sense? Some things you feel it before you get there. Me. Yeah.
We'll see if the language in which I'm going to try to ask this makes sense to both of you. If it doesn't, maybe we'll find another set of terms. But trying to tie something that I see with both the bodies of work and beautiful images, by the way. So thanks for sharing them. But at one level, both projects seem to be heavily invested in kind of the accumulation of traces over time, an index of processes, either material or imagistic. I mean, from a footprint to a photograph, these are two of the kind of examples we have of indexes within the history of art that have been talked about many times. But a photograph also ties directly into a kind of iconicity of the image looking like that which we think it's going to look like. And I think there's also something going on with both of you where this indexicality and iconicity is split. So we have the index, but we don't know what we're looking at anymore. And in that sort of rupture or that tension, or how much does the resemblance, the iconicity to its initial object that's either being traced, recorded, or photographed matter? And at what point then is the work actually kind of increasing or decreasing tension between the accumulation of material traces and that which it is as an image that we're looking at? And at some level, I want to tie this back to drawing, because drawing, actually, we do find constantly fascinations with the leftover traces of the activity of drawing, either the material of graphite or the ink or the mylar or the tools and templates and other things that we use, or even the smudge of a finger across a page. And so we tend to think of drawing as having a kind of indexicality to the material process of making. And so I think there's something really fascinating pull those two things apart. And I don't know if do these terms make sense in terms of how I'm laying it out? Is this something either of you think is interesting to talk about?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't tell you how that's, thanks for putting it into those terms. You all have helped a lot, so thank you. Selfishly, that feels great. That split is ever present, and like I think that's where the energy stops or starts, at least in my drawings, where what point does what give over to which direction. And I think the confusing part is not knowing which end you're starting from. It's sort of like you're just doing this, and they might meet here if this is the middle of perfect overlap, and then they might meet here. So there's more fragment, more image, and then wherever they meet changes. And so the question, I think that's maybe the problem of the photograph or the video, is it's of a thing, and you begin with like something you recognize, you say you know. And I think that is the one step trying to make of where the capturing of it isn't known. But then it makes you question the photograph itself. So it comes back to what are you making and what are you using to capture, if not for those moments that you can, let's say, bring it back. And I know that I'm just a little cautious of it, maybe talking to that type of work that needs something that you know to then understand it, because I'm cautious of understanding. Like, does everything need to be understood? Does that make sense? That's the question, and I'm sorry to answer the question, but it's there. I just, haven't concluded that. Probably won't.
Yeah, maybe your hesitancy to over-identify with what you're is a little bit what I was trying to say with the memory needing to have kind of iterations of memory and to become something new, because I think it's, I mean, in my drawings, the indexicality is quite complicated, and for myself, I have to kind of keep lists of what it is that I've done in my lists anyway. So it's for me, it's more of there's a conjuring so that I can inhabit. It's really about the inhabitation, and then, going into my own little worlds. Whether the relevance to other people, I don't know. These are, like, for me, it's really it's just the start of something. So I don't know if it makes any sense. You guys are the first people. I haven't shown anybody anything. So
My question's actually more of an observation and something to think about, but I couldn't help thinking through both of your talks about a kind of Turner-esque atmosphere to the work. And for me, the thing that that actually Turner has that isn't necessarily found in your work yet is a kind of direct source of heat, like energy or light, the direct light. Both of your worlds rely on reflect or embody in reflected light, but direct light and the presence of direct light in the drawings is, I think, a big question for you. It's just an observation.
Do we speak to observation? So cool that you picked it up. I can't paint very well, so my processes I made them because I can achieve that layering, but I can digitally. Like, it makes more sense to me, and I think that's because I work too fast for paint to draw. So I can't keep up with that pace of a painting. But definitely that, I know exactly what you mean, I think, and that's, at least with the layering, the problem is in the way that it's done now, is that you reach a moment, it's just like darkness. It will absorb and absorb it, and light will do that, and so that it comes. But I do think that it'll become all-encompassing atmospheric, and there's some places don't have that. So what I have found is accidentally I'm drawn to places that I already know, like back here, like what what will become of it once it's on top of itself in other places. So I am trying to not listen, but I get it. Yeah.
Thank you both for lovely presentations. It is, oh, we can clap and then we can, I'm gonna launch. For running.